get in touch with me, and let's see, maybe we can arrange a visit. You get to see how we live according to the esoteric teaching. But you can also live according to the esoteric teaching wherever you are. It's just that in the cities, it's especially difficult. So our spiritual master encouraged us from the very beginning to form communities outside the cities, as far out in the country as possible, and to persevere in our studies of the esoteric teaching in that setting. And yes, we've found that it really makes a difference. The country is in the mode of goodness, and we'll study the modes of material nature as we go through Bhagavad Gita. But the city is in the mode of passion and ignorance. And so these vibes, these energies of material consciousness are very much present in those settings. We try to avoid those settings and stay out in the country where it's peaceful. Yesterday I was waiting for a shipment of some computer equipment, and I was sitting out in front of our kitchen waiting for the UPS guy to show up. And around me there were many birds. There was a layer of clouds just coming in from the south off the Gulf, and the local birds were out in force looking for whatever it is they eat. I don't know what it is. But anyway, there were small little sparrow-type birds, and there were these little red cardinal-type birds, and there were even a couple of vulture hawks parked on a nearby tree. And everything was quiet. There was cows grazing off in the garden where we're getting the soil ready for next spring. And there were a few cars going by on the main road, but other than that, it was completely still and quiet. It was so peaceful. I could just sit there and meditate even with my eyes open. It was no effort at all to go into a sacred space. Why? Because the vibrations around me were so harmonious, so pure. They were automatically peaceful, automatically conducive to meditation. So this is country life, and we recommend that for students of spirituality to get away from the passion and ignorance of the city, surrounded by man-made objects all the time. That's not really the way we're designed to live. We're designed to live in the country. Of course, it's kind of a luxury to live in the country these days. American life especially is very much designed around urban and even suburban living. But that sort of existence is not really sustainable, for one thing, and for another thing, it's not very conducive to spiritual life. The pace here in the country is a lot slower. The nearest store is about 20 miles away, so you really have to think twice before you just hop in the car and tool off to the store to pick something up. I generally go into town about once every 10 days. Anything special out of the ordinary has to be shipped by UPS, for example, computer parts and stuff like that. So you really have to think a little bit before you spend your resources, scarcer and scarcer resources like gasoline, going into the city. It makes life more deliberate, more paced, so that you think more and act less. And after all, that's the goal of monastic life, spiritual life, is to become mindful, to become aware, and more considerate of yourself and others. So that's one aspect of spiritual community life. In the cities, the focus is on preaching and teaching others. And there's a great need for that. There's a huge opportunity to spread the esoteric teaching all over the world. We have a lot of groups in Europe and in Asia that are doing very, very well. For some reason, it's only America that we find it difficult to spread this teaching on a mass level. Maybe that's because Americans have been so conditioned by materialistic propaganda through their media and schools and so forth. But it's very difficult to get people in America to take a stand or make a commitment to spiritual life. That's one reason we have this blog and podcast, is to educate people on the tremendous need for spiritual training. When you come to the time of death and the body is falling away, how will you deal with the changes in consciousness that you'll go through? Will you have people around you who are trained in spiritual life, who can structure your environment so that you're in meditation all the time? You require a community for that. To die properly so that you go to a higher spiritual destination requires help. A lot of it. It requires resources and knowledge. So to surround yourself with people who have the proper spiritual training is really the only way that you can follow the highest principles of yoga, which are to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. Now, this might seem to be far off for most of you, but remember, how you live your life is also how you will die. So he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, but he who lives by God dies in the memory of God. And so, by remembering God at the time of death, one goes to the spiritual planets. This is the message of the esoteric teaching, and this is the secret of all forms of yoga. Yoga is really designed to take us to the spiritual world at the time of death. But to do that successfully, we have to live our life in a spiritual atmosphere. And how do we do that? By being a member of a spiritual community. It's not that you spend 24 hours a day just doing spiritual stuff. But let's say you form a cooperative for childcare among your friends who are into the esoteric teaching. Or let's say you have picnics together. Or let's say that you do other activities together, even bowling. You could have an esoteric teaching bowling team. You know, any kind of association is helpful for spiritual life. But it has to be with people who are into a compatible system of spiritual meditation. That's the esoteric teaching. The esoteric teaching is the highest, most complete, and best source of yoga information that there is on the planet. I spent 20 years researching the different paths, so I can tell you this is a fact. It is the most fidelitous to the original materials on yoga of any path available, especially in the West. What else there is available in the West has mostly been changed beyond recognition. You have to go back to the original material on yoga, read it in Sanskrit, and understand it that way before you can see this. I've done this work, so I'm here to save you some time and trouble by recommending the esoteric teaching as the best and most complete spiritual path available. But you have to do your piece too. You have to organize communities around your practice so that will support your efforts to realize the esoteric teaching and recover your perfect body. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of My Perfect Body. This is David Hughes, your host, reminding you to visit us on the web at esotericteaching.org, where you can purchase the complete Esoteric Teaching Introductory Seminar DVD and many CDs of transcendental music and mantras.